Joining me now is Professor Quentin Parker from the University of Hong Kong. Welcome, Professor. Now, China has a dedicated agency whose job is to retrieve lost art. What is its reach like and how effective is it?
First of all, I'd like to say that every nation whose cultural heritage has been plundered deserves the opportunity to repatriate looted artifacts, including objects and artworks, and perhaps no more so than China. Now, the fact that China has established such an agency gives it a greater reach. If it's adequately resourced, if it's given sufficient government resources, then of course China has the capacity to trawl through all the available auctions that are going on around the world, looking for objects of Chinese cultural heritage value that may not have adequate provenance. So if they don't have adequate provenance, that's an indication that perhaps these objects have been acquired in non-standard ways, perhaps even illegally. With such an agency, they can start to investigate this in detail and also start to exert pressure. A nation state like China has the ability to exert quite a lot of soft power to make things happen in this area.
And how does China exactly go about exerting soft power? I mean, there have been reports in the past that a number of antiques have been stolen from the places that they were stored in. Is that the kind of soft power you're perhaps referring to?
I don't believe personally that China is in the business of raiding museums overseas and repatriating objects to China, because if it did, it would be immediately obvious if they put them into a museum that they've come from a different museum in a different country, suddenly reappeared in China, and that would cause enormous problems. So I don't believe that's actually anything that's serious in terms of suggestions that that kind of activity is going on. But by soft power, I mean that, you know, with the economic clout that a country like China has, and with much of the world involved in serious trade with the nation of China, then this does give such a country quite an ability to exert soft power in all sorts of different ways. And I'm not saying any of this is bad. I'm just saying, you know, nations like America have done this in the past, Britain in the 18th and 19th century. So this is just the real politic of the world at the moment, that such a powerful country like China has more that it can do within its armory of activities that can make things happen.
Let's talk about the legal processes. If somebody wants to return stolen art to China, what is involved in the repatriation process?
That's a very good question, and much depends on the kinds of objects involved, who is the person or persons or indeed museum that has these artifacts, and where have those artifacts come from? Is there a paper trail that shows how these objects were acquired? And how long ago was it? Because a lot of things come down to things like provenance. You know, provenance is just a paper trail, evidence that an object has gone through museums and collectors for a long period of time, and then you end up with it being in a museum eventually, and then you can go back through this paper trail and say, okay, we now know that it came from the Summer Palace in 1860, looted by a French soldier. And obviously, therefore, you have the base data that you need to start a repatriation process.
Right. We'll have to leave it there for the time being, but thanks very much for joining us, Professor Quentin Parker from the University of Hong Kong.